In this part, we'll discuss the analysis of the novel. The Lighthouse, when published, To the Lighthouse, when published in 1927, it made a landmark, not just because it made a change to Virginia Woolf's position as a novelist, but it also marked an important development of the English novel. It has very little dialogues, very little action like we saw in the summary, and it has been analyzed threadbare from a philosophical and psychological perspective, and various interpretations to various acts in the novel have been suggested by the literary world. And I've read some research papers, I've read Google, and I've come across with what I've just gathered all the data, and I'll present as much as I know about it to you. So a major theme in the novel is the reconciliation of the opposites, the sea and the island, the feminine and the masculine, people of opposite behavior, how they reconcile, how they learn to live together. Like Mr. Ramsay, who had always been an angry father, and even the day when they begin the journey to the lighthouse, the children begin by hating their father. Oh, we have to go with him. James and Cam have no love for Mr. Ramsay, and Mr. Ramsay is so egoist that such an egoist that he cannot understand his children. But as they reach to the lighthouse, as they are close to it, they experience a connection as Mr. Ramsay lets go of his ego and praises James for his steering skills at the boat, and Cam admires Mr. Ramsay for his bravery, and there is that moment, that vibe of love between them as they reach the lighthouse. It is a symbolic journey from egotism to impersonality. It is a symbolic journey from letting go of your ego to trying to understand and live with people of different behaviors and different personality. So it is the reconciliation of the opposites, which is a major theme in the novel. Another theme is the meaning of life. Every character in To the Lighthouse tries to understand life from his or her own perspective. For Mrs. Ramsay, in the beginning, we see that life means to her domestic happiness. She loves taking care of her children, of her husband, and like I mentioned earlier, even when they go to the lighthouse, she prepares socks for the lighthouse keeper. So that's her nature. So life to her is that domestic happiness. That's the meaning of life to her. For William Banks and for Charles Tensley, the meaning of life lies in work, professional success, so they strive towards that. Mr. Ramsay oscillates between the two things. Sometimes he turns to his family, sometimes he turns to his profession, so he oscillates between the two. Lily Briscoe, to her, the meaning of life is in making of art, and what Woolf tries to say is that everybody can have different perspectives about life, and that the meaning of life is subjective. Another important theme is that of time. The novel To the Lighthouse explores time at every scale. In the beginning, in the first part, the window, we see that every second is mentioned, the impression of every moment is being mentioned. And then in the second part, there's a sudden jump of 10 years, and even in that description, important events like death of Mrs. Ramsay, death of Prue, death of Andrew, the destruction of the First World War, they are bogged down to single sentence parentheticals. So Woolf tries to tell us that the clock time is inadequate to measure the profoundness of human experience. Sometimes a moment lasts for an eternity, and sometimes 20 years might just speed by in a second. Albert Einstein's relativity brought out in literature. So she explores time in such a beautiful manner, because in the first part we see that everybody is sensing the little moments, and that's what modernist writing was about. It was about recording impression. It was impressionist writing, which lacked an omniscient narrator who could see everywhere and say, there was a boy who lived and one day he went to the school and this happened and this happened and this is the story of his life. Modernist writing was not like that. Modernist writing was about recording the impressions, recording what you see in the colors, in little gestures, and it's a travel into your psyche. That's what it is. So time is explored in a very unique and in a very believable way by Virginia Woolf. Another thing is that since the novel is written in the stream of consciousness technique, Woolf gives us the impressions through various characters. She jumps from one memory to another, one moment to another, one memory to another, one thought to another, one opinion to another, and she ultimately tries to tell us that how associative is the nature of the human mind, how we quickly connect one thing to another, and simply if we are sitting, how we jump from one thought to another based on our experiences, based on our expectations. And so she tries to keep lofty thoughts like meaning of life, death, destruction, all these big thoughts are at par with everyday ones. She says that all those big thoughts and the everyday tasks of life, they come on one level into the lighthouse. In the end, when Lily Briscoe is painting Mrs. Ramsay, she says that one will need 50 pairs of eyes to understand Mrs. Ramsay. And that's exactly what the novel is, because it's written from 50 pairs of eyes. It's written from different points of view of different characters. Another theme in the novel is that of permanence. Everybody is trying to attain something. Everybody is trying to reach to something permanent. Mrs. Ramsay, she thinks about her childhood, her marriage, how she became a mother, her domestic life, the future of her children. And ultimately she thinks, how tiny is human existence? Where are we all going to go? None of us is permanent. She accepts this. Mr. Ramsay, on the other hand, is trying to achieve permanence in his work, but then he thinks that his work, like the work of all other great men, is also someday going to be carried forward by the future generations. So where's permanence? Lily Briscoe tries to achieve this permanence through her art of painting, and binding all of these is the lighthouse, which stands across the bay as a symbol of permanence, which watches over all of them, which has seen the war, which has seen the death of everybody, and yet it is standing there. And that is why the journey to the lighthouse is a journey towards that permanence in life. To give a quick recap of the themes, we have in the novel To the Lighthouse, first, the meaning of life, which is interpreted in different ways by different characters, and ultimately Woolf tries to say that the meaning of life is nothing fixed, it is subjective. Second, the reconciliation of opposites, the masculine, feminine, the sea and the island, people of opposite behavior, how everything gets reconciled. Third is time, how one moment can last for eternity and how 20 years can just speed by in a jiffy. And fourth is the complexity of human relationships. Fifth is their need, their desire for something permanent in life. And there are a little more points that I have noted down, which is the complexity of experience, the complexity of human relationships, the transience of life and work, how short-lived is a life and how short-lived is every work of art. And art as a means of preservation is another theme. The subjective nature of reality is a theme. The restorative effects of beauty. So I can go on elaborating, but I will just stop here, and that's it for the themes into the lighthouse.